It says we're live. Hello, hello, everyone. It is Tuesday, 4 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Central, no, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. in London, Milan, and most of Europe, 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia, 11:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in New Zealand, and it's Facebook Live. Hello, everyone, and I am very excited to welcome today our guests, Doctors Joe and Lara Pizzorno. And if there is anyone out there that does not recognize that name or those names, these folks are icons in the field of holistic healthcare. And you get to be an icon by walking softly and leaving big footprints. And if I were to give a description of Joe Pizzorno, that would be it. You know, walking softly. Yes, thank you, Joe. Thank you for all that you do. And we're talking tonight about their new book. Lara is the main author of their new book, Healthy Bones, Healthy You. And to give you a sense of this book, they asked if I could write a small summary for them on the book, and I was proud to do that. And I'm going to read to you what I wrote, because this says it better than any words that I could give you right now. In every discipline, we can find good instructors. With enough searching, we can usually find a really good teacher. Rarely, we can find a gifted mentor who shares a path to excellence, and rarely, very rarely, we find a sage. A sage says very little, but you hang on every word. The Pizzornos have done it again. Another book meant to be the authoritative text, not just on osteoporosis, but on healthy bones. And you're going to learn there's a big difference between preventing osteoporosis and having healthy bones. There were so many things in this book I didn't know. Jaw-dropping again and again. Love, love, love it. Must be the reference in every family's home on the topic of healthy bones. Thank you, Lara and Joe. I know how much work this takes to put together a Bible like this. There should be an award. And I'm sure there will be many awards for this, but it's an incredible book. And so welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the very kind introduction.
Yeah, the award is all the people that are not going to have to suffer from osteoporosis.
Amen.
It's a personal mission for me.
Yeah, and you know, normally I avoid, well, tell us why you wrote the book. You know, that's kind of those silly questions, but in your case, with your story, it really helps for people to understand. So Lara, can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. Osteoporosis, quote unquote, ran in my family. It has stopped with me, but I lost, you know, all the women in my family broke their hips and died earlier than they should have. I lost my mother years earlier than I should have, and my aunts, and I still miss them every day, and I don't want anybody else to lose their mother early, or or break their own hip, and it's not necessary. So that is why I wrote the book. When I was in my early 40s, Joe and I were at a medical conference, and we went to the exhibit hall. And this is years and years ago. I'm now 73. This is like over almost 30 years ago, and the information about osteoporosis was just really starting to become well known. And they had some equipment in the exhibit hall, that small piece of equipment that doctors could use to check bone density in someone's ankle. And then if that was bad, then they would order them the full-fledged DEXA and so forth. So we went over, and I expected to be gloriously healthy because I am married to this person. And I already had osteopenia, and it was well before menopause. And I had been doing everything right, the good exercise, eating really healthfully and so forth. And so we were shocked. And that started us on the odyssey of trying to figure out what was going on. For me, it's largely genetic, but also, nutritional requirements and so forth. So that was the start for me.
Lara, I've got two questions. The first one, what is osteopenia? for our people who are out there?
Right. So osteopenia is bone thinning. You know, you're losing some bone. And actually, more people have, there are more fractures in people who are osteopenic than actually in osteoporosis. I think in part it's because there are just more people that have osteopenia. But it's kind of like the precursor for osteoporosis. In a way, it's analogous to pre-diabetes. You know, you get a little bit of insulin resistance, and then you develop metabolic syndrome, and then oops, you got diabetes.
Right.
Sort of the same thing with osteoporosis and osteopenia.
Right. So osteopenia is the precursor. It's the warning sign that you're on the path. You're heading down the road to osteoporosis.
Right. You're losing bone and more quickly than you're rebuilding. And if you don't do something about it, you'll develop osteoporosis.
And my second question is, and I know people are going to ask this right away, how do I tell if I'm osteopenic or osteoporosis? If I have osteoporosis, how do I tell? Are there any early signs, like you mentioned the machine on the ankle? Is that something that people have access to?
I think some doctors still use that. Probably, you know, at this point, most people are not able with their insurance to, unless their doctor thinks that they have a whole lot of reasons why they might be developing osteoporosis, to get a DEXA. But that's really the way to know. Also, there's a new software program that uses the same DEXA images called TBS, trabecular bone score. That tells you more about the interior health of your bone. DEXA just tells you how much bone mineral you have. It doesn't tell you whether that bone mineral is healthy or if it's old brittle stuff. The trabecular bone score tells you about the connectivity of the interior of your bones. Are they, well connected and strong, or are they fragile? But the best way, I think, for younger people who are listening, who might want to know, their mother had osteoporosis or an aunt or so forth, and they're concerned, there are blood tests that can be run to check what are called bone turnover markers. And the two most reliable and most used are CTX and PINP. CTX is a marker of bone resorption, and PINP is a marker of bone formation. And they should be within normal ranges, and balanced. Like, you want your resorption to be balanced by your formation. And those tests are inexpensive, and they should be covered by insurance.
Resorption means losing bone cells.
Right.
Am I right? Okay.
Right.
So
it means bone breakdown.
Right. So there's one blood test that looks at, are you breaking down more bone than what would be normal for your age?
Right.
And the other blood test says, are you making enough bone for your age? Am I correct on that?
Right.
Great. All right. So those are simple things that people can do right away. And who should suspect that they may have a problem? Are there like warning signs? Like, I broke a leg when I was 13. I broke a finger when I was 19. I haven't broken anything since, but is there a history that you look for? How do people kind of choose that I think I need to put some time and dollars into getting this test done?
There are some pretty well-known risk factors. If you're fair-skinned and you don't get a lot of sun exposure, and if anybody in your family has ever had, they call it a fragility fracture. So the fractures that you experienced, I'm assuming they were traumatic fractures where you did something, right? If you're going to have a ski accident or whatever, you can break a bone. That's not osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is when you step off the curb and your femur snaps.
Right.
That's because your bones are so fragile.
Right.
So
now we have Dr. Joe here also, who is the go-to guy in the world on environmental toxins and many other things. Dr. Pizzorno is so soft-spoken, he won't tell you, but he's one of the founders of the whole functional medicine movement and the founder of Bastyr University, the go-to college for naturopathy in the world. So this guy is a walking encyclopedia that many of us sit at his feet and just read his papers and his books. So, Dr. Joe, can we take a moment and go into the environment and how the environment a person might be in sets them up to have more vulnerability for osteoporosis?
Well, first of all, Tom, thank you for the very, very kind compliments. It means a lot to me.
It means that's true. It's all true, and you're very welcome.
Well, I'll answer that question, but let me say something first. One of the things that fascinated me as Lara was creating this book with some of my help was she looked at a particular factor and said, oh, wow, this is really important for bone health. And I said, well, but that's also important for the kidneys. And she looked at another factor and that's important for bone health. I said, wait, but that's important to keep our brains and keep our neurons from degenerating. And what we found was that factor after factor that's critical for bone health is important everywhere else in the body as well. So when the publisher suggested a different name for the book, Healthy Bones, Healthy You, I thought it was a great title because indeed, the things we do to make our bones healthy makes everything else work better as well.
Got it.
So as you're aware, I'm now lecturing literally all over the world, except for COVID time, I should say. But up until COVID, I was spending about 100,000 miles a year flying around the world teaching doctors that environmental metals and chemicals have become the primary drivers of chronic disease in the industrialized world. And Tom, the numbers are just stunning, just stunning. So while we can talk a lot about a lot of other diseases like diabetes, for example, as I can tell, 9% of diabetes is due to environmental toxins. It turns out environmental toxins play a big role in the bone health as well. And some research that was done actually here in Seattle, where they estimated that 20% of osteoporosis in women is due to cadmium. People say, wait, cadmium? Where do you get cadmium from? Well, there's two sources of cadmium, primary sources. One is cigarette smoking, and the other is eating soy products from soy that was grown synthetically with high phosphate fertilizers. Because high phosphate fertilizers, while they make food grow more quickly, they're also often contaminated with cadmium. So it turns out that as a person's cadmium levels go up, their bone density goes down. Now, why is that? So it looks like there's two mechanisms that we're aware of right now. Mechanism number one is it poisons the osteoblasts. So these are the cells in the bone that are responsible for remineralizing the bone. Well, it poisons them. But the other thing that does, which is quite insidious, is that our bodies are very good at getting calcium out of the blood. But what happens is it goes into the kidneys. And when it gets into the kidneys, it gets stuck there. So the half-life of cadmium in the kidneys is about 16 years. So it's damaging the kidneys.
Wow.
So eventually the kidneys can no longer convert vitamin D to its dihydroxyl most active form, and the kidneys become less able to get rid of the excess acidity in our diet. The Western diet, with the way it's metabolized in the body, causes way too much acid formation in the body. Now, when we're younger and healthy, the kidneys can get rid of that excess acidity. But as the kidneys become damaged from like cadmium, they become less able to get rid of the excess acid, which means we now have to take calcium out of the bone to neutralize that excess acidity, and that causes osteoporosis as well.
Got it. Got it. Wow.
Also, in your kidneys are that is the primary area where you convert vitamin D into its active form that helps you absorb calcium. So when your kidneys aren't working properly, that is a big problem. You can't absorb calcium.
One of the things that we heard many years ago, and I'm going to get to shout outs in a couple of minutes, guys, but I'm just so entranced with our guests here and the amount of knowledge they have to share with all of us. I've got a few questions I want to run through. One of the things we learned many, many years ago is that perimenopausal women often will lose more bone during that time. And if there's an acceleration in that, when they lose that bone, so many of them have had lead in their bones for many, many years that it was deposited there. Mm-hmm. And now that as the bone cells break down, the lead gets out into the bloodstream and it has an affinity to the brain. And so the dementia, the brain dysfunction that occurs in perimenopausal women exponentially rises over about a decade from just before menopause happening to just as menopause is done. All of a sudden, there's more more loss of cognitive function. Lara, can you talk about that for a minute? Is that still accurate information?
Well, I'm not so aware of the loss of cognitive function in perimenopausal women. That's not an area I've studied. Maybe Joe will, but I do want to put a shout out to perimenopausal women that what happens is they don't test women until they're postmenopausal.
Right.
And they should. People should start to become aware. You start to lose bone a little bit as early as in your 30s. And if you don't do the things that you need to do to support the health of your bones, by the time you get to menopause and they check you, you have osteoporosis, and you shouldn't have to get there. So, perimenopausal women, they've thought that they don't lose bone, and they lose quite a bit of bone. And I'm the bone health expert on a website called the AlgaCal Community, and I tape videos for that. And the most recent one I taped was all on perimenopausal women, talking about the research showing that they are losing bone and what's causing it and what they should be doing about it, not waiting till they become, osteoporotic. So I'll turn it over to my husband now.
Well,
Okay.
Great observation, Tom. And not only do women's lead levels go up when they lose bone in the perimenopausal time, but mercury comes up as well. And I've often thought, actually, I hypothesized in an editorial several years ago, could it be that the crazy old men and the hysteric old women, these pejorative terms we use for older people, could it be that they're suffering metal poisoning, neurotoxic metal poisoning, because of they're losing their bones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember hearing that from Dr. George Goodhart back in the late 70s, that concept and how important it was to make sure that your patients, as they're going through a change of life, that you're being aware of the need maybe to detox a little bit more, make sure their elimination systems are working properly to eliminate that. So for everyone that's listening tonight, Dr. Lara has to leave in about 12 or 13 minutes because she's in her master's program in organic chemistry, and her class
Nutrition, yeah.
in
Clinical
nutrition.
nutrition.
Right. Oh, in clinical nutrition and the organic chemistry classes tonight. Yeah. So she's got to get online for her class. So so Lara, let's go to what do you recommend for men and for women? First, before you do that, we're going to put the link in here for the book so that everyone orders this book. It's one of those that has to be on your shelf as a reference book. When 2 years from now, you've got a question about bone health, this is the book that you want to go to. So we'll put the link in here. So you'll have access to all this information when you get the book. But from the author's lips, what are the things that people can do to help protect their bones?
Well, I think the first thing that you should do is have the basic labs run. I have a section on labs in the back of the book, and there are some very basic ones that should be run when you have your yearly checkup. That'll really give you some insight. Everybody should have their vitamin D levels checked. Even people who live in Hawaii. They've done research on young people in Hawaii and who are outside 25, 30 hours every week, not using sunscreen. And many of them still did not have good levels of vitamin D. There's a whole bunch of genetic things that are involved with this. But you can't just assume your vitamin D levels are going to be good. And if they're not, then you should be supplementing so that you can absorb calcium. You can't absorb calcium, you can't have healthy bones. So,
excuse me, what do you recommend as a healthy level of vitamin D?
Between 60 and 80 nanograms per ml. 30 nanograms per ml, 29 nanograms per ml is deficient. So 30 nanograms per ml, which many doctors say is good, is really not adequate. And the latest research clearly shows we need about between the range of 60 to 80, particularly for immune function, which in our current day and age has become much more important, how to support our immune systems so that we can survive. So I think vitamin D is very important. People should have their serum calcium levels checked, and their parathyroid hormones levels checked, and their thyroid hormone levels checked. I mean, all of these things are and your kidney function. You want to know, are my kidneys working properly? Because there's plenty of things you can do to rebuild your kidney function, natural, safe things that cost really nothing. But you have to know in terms of your diet what you should be doing to support your health. And an ounce of prevention, the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth many pounds of cure.
Yes, agreed.
So that would be the first thing.
And in the back of your book, you have a list of these tests that you recommend.
do. I have a section on labs. I explain what the labs are, why you would have them run, and I provide links to them. So we're not associated with any lab. We don't get any money for recommending a lab, but people, it's hard to find some of this stuff. So I tried to make it as easy as possible for people to access the good labs. And those are things, and many of them, most all of them are covered by insurance. When you go in to see your doctor for your, checkup, you can say, gee, I'd like to have a few of these things run, so I have some idea about where I am.
Perfect. It sounds perfect. And so first thing to do is to get tested to find out, and I've said this so many times, the rule is test, don't guess, right? So you look at what your status currently is, and let's assuming that everything's in the okay range, or maybe a little bit on the lower side of okay, but they're in okay range. What's a general overview that people need to think about in terms of maintaining strong bones?
Exercise is really important. Your bones will not rebuild without being stimulated to do so. And that stimulation happens when you exercise, when you move around. And weight-bearing exercise, it puts stress on the muscles put stress on the bones, and that activates actually the most populous cell. The majority of the cells in your bones are called osteocytes, and they're mechanosensors, and they're activated by exercise. And when you're exercising, those cells turn on and they say, gee, there's a little area here that's not looking so good. Let's rebuild that. And they get that going. If you're not exercising, well, I think most people know about astronauts. One of the problems of going into space is when there's no gravity that you're moving against. Astronauts lose bone at a horrific rate. It's one of the big problems for being in space. So you can do that, at home, sitting on your couch. It's not quite as effective as going into outer space, but it'll do the job if you don't move around. So exercise is really important. And then, the final thing is eating real food, not the processed stuff, that imitation food that is actually really harmful for us in a number of ways, which we tried to summarize and clarify for people in the book. The standard American diet is a bone killer.
I have two questions. The first one, you referenced weight-bearing exercise. And I remember some articles way back in the 80s that said swimming is not adequate to be a weight-bearing exercise. Is that still true today, that it's an excellent form of exercise, but it doesn't really help so much for your bones? Is that correct?
Unfortunately, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, and then coupled with that is the chlorine that people are swimming in, and I'll ask Dr. Joe on this one. Higher exposure to chlorine, does that have any relevance in terms of bone strength?
Oh, good question. Tom, I haven't looked at that. I don't know.
I've stumped the guru. That is very rare.
It's like
I don't know either. I don't know either on that one. So that was my first question. The second question, Dr. Joe, to you. I was embarrassed that I read a study 2 weeks ago that I had never read when it came out, and that was in 2018. It was from the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it was about conventional foods and eating conventional fruits and vegetables and their impact on pregnant women. And that one of the statistics that dropped my jaw was if they were eating greater than 2.3 servings of conventional fruits and vegetables, which means a salad with tomatoes and cucumber and carrots and a few things in it, if they were eating 2.3 servings or more per day, they had a 26% chance of not having a live birth from the pregnancy.
Oh
And
my gosh.
this was in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And there was a comment about the article that said, this is an elegant study looking at these biomarkers. And I was shocked. Now, so my question to you for our topic tonight is chemical exposures and bone health. Can you give us a couple of minutes on that topic?
I can, but I want to go back to where you started. Okay. I mean, this is scary stuff.
Yeah.
So the more conventionally grown fruits and vegetables a person eats, the higher their organophosphate pesticide levels. Organophosphates are neurotoxins. So we then look at the children born to those pregnant women and look at the children born to women in the top 10% of body load of organophosphate pesticides compared to children born to women with bottom 10% organophosphate pesticides. Statistically iron out all the socioeconomic differences. So we just look at the neurotoxins. The children born to women in the top 10% of organophosphate pesticides have a 7-point lower IQ than born to the women with the lowest level of organophosphate pesticides. 3 studies have found exactly the same thing. So are you asking me if eating conventionally grown foods increases osteoporosis risk? Yes, and everything else. Unfortunately, actually, when we get to my half of the conversation, I'd love to talk to you about what has happened to our food supply and how it is destructive of our health now.
I would love to continue the conversation. I'm sensitive to Lara's classes starting in 2 minutes. I'm very sensitive to that.
So you
see, yeah, Joe's going to log in. I see a question on the sidebar I could respond to about meat.
Yes.
And pasture meat from, Joe and I are pescatarians. We don't eat meat. We eat fish, but not meat. But pasture meat from pastured animals, organically fed and so forth, is a completely different animal than the conventionally, feedlot beef. That kind of meat can be a very healthy addition to someone's diet, and it does not cause bone loss. What you have to be careful with is when you have more protein in your diet, the meat causes a little bit of a loss of calcium. So if you're having meat in your diet, you really have to make sure that you're getting enough calcium. And in the research that they've done, women who were having higher protein diets and good calcium levels did great. They had far less hip fractures. But if they were having meat without the calcium, that was a problem.
That's really good information, Lara. And one question to that, was there any difference dependent on blood type? Because we've heard that blood type O people, the oldest blood type on the planet, they're meant to have more protein. So was that concept true with them, or did the researchers not isolate by blood type?
They did not look at it that way. I mean, you know how the research is. Sometimes they leave out, in my opinion, some of the most important things in their studies for what they're analyzing. But the basic takeaway is pasture raised or organic meat can be a very healthy addition to someone's diet. You really do need to be getting your 1,200 milligrams of calcium daily, though. It's quite important. If you're low on your calcium, it can be a problem.
That's a great pearl to end with you on. Write down the number, 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day, and then you'll start adding up where you're getting your calcium from, everyone. Lara,
in the book, there's a table that tells the common sources of calcium and what the amount is in a serving. So you can very quickly get an estimate of what your diet's providing for you. Most people in the US are not getting enough from the diet.
Really good to know. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for writing the book. It's a great reference book for all of us. Thank you so much, and enjoy your class.
And now you get my better half by far. You'll be really happy that I had to leave. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So, Dr. Joe, this concept about organophosphates and pregnant women affecting children's brain health, we've heard that. I've quoted the study many times about 346 women in Chicago, 2016, and they measured 5 phthalates in their urine in the 8th month of pregnancy, and they divided them into quartiles. And the highest they followed the children at 7 years old. They did Wechsler IQ tests on them, and the children in the highest quartile of mom's phthalates in urine in pregnancy compared to the children in the lowest quartile, the IQ difference was 6.7 to 7.4 points difference. That every child, if mom was in the highest quartile of phthalates, just 5 phthalates, including BPA was one of them they looked at. If mom was in the highest quartile, every child was 6.7 to 7.4 points lower. And as you said, 3 studies that you've referenced on a similar topic. So we're talking about the brains of our next generation here.
Yes, very worrisome. And so going back to your question about chemicals and osteoporosis, so let's start with the phthalates. So it's very clear, as phthalate levels go up, so does the incidence of osteoporosis. One of the things I've been working on is trying to look at various countries, look at their body load of environmental toxins, and then look at their incidence of disease. So I just finished 5 lectures for Australia. I'll be giving them in 2 weeks. And I was trying to look at how the Australian body load of toxins compares to the US and how it compares to disease. So one of the things I decided to do was to look at the incidence of diabetes in Australia and the incidence of diabetes in the United States. And it turns out that there's twice as much diabetes in the US as in Australia. Then I looked at which of the toxins are worst at causing diabetes. And by the way, phthalates is one of the worst toxins.
Wow.
So I said, okay, what's the phthalate level in Australia compared to phthalate level in the United States? It was half as much in the United States.
Wow.
So they have half as much phthalates and they have half as much diabetes. Then I looked at cadmium, going back to cadmium again, and we know cadmium very, very strongly associated with kidney failure. I mean, it causes kidney failure. So I looked at cadmium levels in Australia and the incidence of kidney failure in Australia. Their cadmium levels are just the same as the US, and their kidney failure is just the same as the US. Okay, we can keep going back to bones. How about the perfluorinated compounds? These are the non-stick compounds, or, Teflon, things like this. Turns out as the PFASs, that's what they're called, as those levels go up, so does the incidence of osteoporosis and all kinds of other diseases as well. So basically, we are now suffering the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever in human history. Why is that? Because of all these metals and chemicals in the environment, combined with a diet of foods that have been severely distorted by growing them chemically rather than naturally.
Yeah.
Can I continue on that riff?
Yes, please.
Okay. So as I was looking for the toxins, trying to figure out, well, what's the worst toxin? Do you know what? So I want to ask you, what do you think is the worst toxin in the United States?
The worst toxin in the United States.
Worst toxin in the United States.
My guess would be mercury.
Oh, great choice. Mercury is really problematic, but I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to surprise you because everybody else is surprised. It's arsenic.
Wow. 35%
of adults in the United States have arsenic levels known to induce disease in humans.
35%.
35%. So I think, wait a minute, everybody knows about lead and mercury and things like that. Why don't people know about arsenic? So I was wondering, could it be that arsenic is more toxic now than it used to be? See, arsenic is a toxin we were exposed to as we evolved as a species. So we're actually good at detoxifying arsenic as long as we're not exposed to it all the time. But now we're being exposed to it all the time. So I'm thinking, well, could it be that it's more toxic now? So I started looking at, well, what protects the body from arsenic? In particular, I suspect I'll surprise you with this number, 1/4 to 1/3 of cancers appear to be due to arsenic.
Wow.
So,
whoa.
Yeah, and the way the arsenic does that is by damaging DNA. So it turns out that flavonoids in foods help both increase the efficiency by which we get rid of arsenic and repair the DNA where it's been damaged from arsenic. But when you grow foods chemically rather than organically, you lose the flavonoids that protect us from the arsenic. Yeah. So the arsenic levels have not gone up particularly. What's happened is it's more toxic now because we can't protect ourselves.
Yeah. I talk about in rebuilding the microbiome, one of the things is to make your own applesauce, because the pectin in apples increases intestinal alkaline phosphatase and all of the trickle down benefits of that. And I show the study that organic apples compared to conventional apples, it's 34 to 56% more polyphenols in the organic apples, 1/3 to 1/2 more.
Yes.
And another reason why we need to be organic.
Absolutely.
On the arsenic story, especially for my audience, because I've never checked, but my guess would be we would find somewhere over 70 to 80% of our viewers are completely gluten-free. I would suspect, because I talk about it a lot, and you're at higher risk of arsenic because we eat so much more rice when we're not eating wheat. And Dr. Joe, can you talk a little about rice and arsenic?
Yes. So, we are gluten-free. We've been gluten-free for a very long period of time. When I saw that research that the foods we were substituting for wheat were higher in arsenic, I was pretty dismayed.
Yes.
So here's the situation. I'm not sure what the chemistry is, but for some reason, rice is very good at absorbing arsenic, just like beans are very good at absorbing cadmium. Okay. So it turns out if there's arsenic in the water where the rice is being grown, the rice will absorb it. It doesn't matter whether it's organically grown or conventionally grown. If the water supply is contaminated with arsenic, they're going to pick it up. Now, before you say, well, that must be very unusual. Okay, here's this bad statistics. 10% of the public water supplies that we drink have arsenic levels known to induce disease in humans. So 10 micrograms per deciliter of water, 10 micrograms per liter of water is the supposed standard for safe levels. It's too high, okay? I got a bunch of research to show that. So 10% of public water supplies are above 10. But here's the kicker. Only 50% of the public water supplies have reported their arsenic levels.
Wow.
This is like a $50 test. Why would these multi-million-dollar water supply sources not measure the arsenic? Well, you can take a guess, okay? Because it's hard to get it out of the water supply. You can do it, but it's expensive. So we have a lot of arsenic in the water, but also if now rice is being grown in that area with that water supply, well, guess what? It's going to be full of arsenic as well. And up until relatively recently, one of the fertilizers used for rice was chicken manure. Well, chickens were intentionally given arsenic as a pharmaceutical to treat their worms and make them grow fatter. Now, the USDA no longer allows the use of arsenic. Now, unfortunately, however, the environment where chickens are being raised are still saturated with the arsenic. So we get a lot of arsenic from water, rice, and chicken.
And a thought that comes up for me, please tell me if I'm on the right track on this, is that most rice is not grown with public water supplies. That the water that the farmers get comes out of the rivers and the streams, and not the treated public water supply.
Right.
And so the level of toxins is going to be higher in that water.
So about half the arsenic in the water supply is from naturally occurring rocks. Okay, so that's why we as a species, we're going to get rid of arsenic because we're constantly being exposed to it, not high levels, but we're exposed to it as we evolved as a species. Half-life is only like 2 days. Okay, but we had half from just natural rock, and the other half is industrial contamination, where we've intentionally put arsenic into how about wooden climbing toys? Remember those wooden climbing toys we used to make for our children? Well, they use arsenical compounds to keep the wood from rotting. So when kids are crawling on it, they're getting the arsenic. And when that wood breaks down, it goes right into the water supply.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wasn't that also the case with the wood they were using to build decks, outdoor decks?
Exactly.
And so if you have a deck that was built before 1978, I think it was, that deck is outgassing these toxic chemicals into the air. When you're sitting out there on a sunny afternoon on your deck, if it was built before 1978, the wood is likely contaminated.
Yeah. Very worrisome.
My gosh. So, and I talk about a lot recently about the brain as the canary in the coal mine, as the early warning. And, we all know someone that had a heart attack, they survived, they changed their diet, they started exercising, they feel better than they felt in years, right? someone diagnosed with cancer go through the recommended protocols, they put it into remission and they feel great. Most of us don't know anyone diagnosed with a brain deterioration disease that's doing great. Most of us don't. And so we're terrified when we look at the brain and how our brain is functioning, and we make jokes. Oh, I'm getting older. I don't remember the way I used to. Haha. Well, how old are you? Well, I'm 38. And that's not supposed to happen. Blue Cross Blue Shield came out last year with a report that between 2013 and 2017, the increase in early onset dementia in 30 to 44-year-olds in 4 years was 407%.
Oh,
in 4 years. So am I on the right track here? Are you seeing this also where in the last decade, the level of diseases are going neck and neck with the increased level of chemical toxicity and exposures that we're in the world we're living in?
Yep, exactly right. You got it right, Tom. You know, we have that highest burden of chronic disease ever, and it's going up. And it's going up in proportion to toxic exposure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was so interesting about Australia was comparing our toxin to their toxins. So I mentioned the phthalates being half as much diabetes, you know, cadmium, same amount of kidney failure. Turns out Australia has the highest level of air pollution as a country in the world. Okay.
Wow.
And they have a lot of these you know, the PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are very carcinogenic. So it turns out they have very high levels of these carcinogenic PAHs, and they have the highest incidence of lung cancer anywhere in the world.
Wow.
It directly correlates. So the particular country, what diseases they're going to bear are dependent upon what are the toxins that they're exposing their population to.
Yeah. Yeah. A question came in. Is there a way to reduce arsenic in rice? Does rinsing before cooking help?
Yes, very good point. So if you just soak it for like a minute, as much as 5 minutes, and then throw out the water and then cook it, you'll be okay.
Mhm.
So you'll be okay, at least you get most of the arsenic out in that way. But remember, while you're getting the arsenic out, you're probably going to be losing some of your trace minerals as well.
What do you think of strontium? A doctor I respect said last week taking strontium makes the bone look thicker and on MRI, but in reality, it does not truly strengthen and build the bone.
So there's some truth and there's also some inaccuracies in that. So yes, strontium is a little more radiodense than calcium. However, strontium increases the absorption of calcium, and there's a correlation between strontium and bone strength. So yes, there will be a little bit of an artifact with the bones might be a little bit denser, but it's not a very big issue, but they clearly help make the bones healthier. Now, I want to be very clear. We're talking about strontium citrate, not strontium ranelate. Calcium ranelate is a drug, and the ranelate is very, very toxic. So we see the negative research on strontium. The negative research is on strontium ranelate, not on strontium citrate.
Really good to know. Really
Yeah,
good
very
to
important.
know. When people are diagnosed with osteoporosis, their doctor often may prescribe some medication to help their bodies build stronger bone. And the most common category are bisphosphonates.
All right.
You see, when talking to doctors about this, they'll say, no, I've read the study. The bones are stronger. Look, and you'll see a study where the x-rays look stronger. The x-rays look like denser bone pre and post bisphosphonate therapy. However, the number of fractures on people who take bisphosphonates compared to same numbers of women, postmenopausal women that don't take bisphosphonates are almost identical. So
Short term.
yeah, short term. And my answer to that has been, well, it's true. You do make more bone when you take bisphosphonates, but the bone you make is balsa wood. It's not oak.
So, Tom, you're right on. And this is the seductive problem of the drugs. Short term, looks like things are getting better. But what they're doing is they're blocking the bone remodeling. What I mean by that is they're impairing the body's natural process to remove damaged bone and put back in healthy bone. So if you stop removing the damaged bone, well, it looks like for a short period of time, you got more calcium in your bones, therefore your bones should be stronger because the x-rays are denser, but it's crappy bone. It's bone the body was trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
And so short term, yeah, the numbers are going to look good. Go out 3, 4, 5 years, and now you're in serious trouble because you've built up a bunch of crappy bone, not as strong, and you have a bunch of fractures.
And these kinds of recommendations sometimes come from our experts in the field who their doctor recommends them to the endocrinologist or to the bone expert who makes these recommendations. So I want to non-politically encourage everyone that when you have a recommendation like that from your doctor to take a medication, you want to explore for yourself a little bit on what can I do to help in my lifestyle to build stronger bone? What can I do in my eating habits? What can I do in exercise? Because some doctors will say, well, exercise, and you say, well, I swim every day. And they'll say, oh, that's fine. That's good for you. It's really good exercise. That they didn't read the studies that it has to be weight-bearing exercise.
For bone, yes.
For bone, to build stronger bone. Dr. Joey, are there certain types of weight-bearing exercises for perimenopausal women who may not have been exercising much in their life? Are there certain types that you prefer more than others?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if a person does have osteoporosis, notice I'm saying person, not necessarily men or women, because men get it as well. And then men don't have as much osteoporosis, but it tends to be worse. Okay, so this is everybody. So actually, Lara did a very good job in her book, talk about the use of things like bar, for example, bar 3. These kinds of stresses on the bones are very, very effective. And if done properly, are safe for the bones as well. So that's important. If you got osteoporosis, don't go out and start doing really intense exercises because you might exceed what your body can handle, what your bones can handle until they're stronger. Right. So these things like yoga and bar and Pilates, things of this nature, are a great way to strengthen bones.
Yeah, agreed. And so if you do a year of bar exercises or Pilates, or I like a mini trampoline. And for seniors, you know, they've got these trampolines that have a bar, a support bar on one side, so you can hold it and you're just walking on it. You know, so if you're able to walk on your own, you can exercise on a mini trampoline and you just walk, you know, and then there's videos, you might start twisting a little bit. The type of exercise, it has to be weight bearing. That's critically important.
Let's break that down. It has to be slightly traumatizing to the bone.
Right.
So that's the problem with swimming. Yeah, you exercise your muscles, but it's not traumatizing the bone. Right. Every time you step off a curb or something, you get a little trauma to the bone. And that activates all those electrosensors.
Yeah, right on the money with that. Here's a question from Susanna. Can a stand-up vibration plate stimulate bone growth? Hello and thank you from Oceanside, California.
Oh, that's a good question. I wish Lara was here. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that either.
I would tend to be on the more negative side on that, but I haven't actually looked at the research. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, Susanna. Neither one of us can answer. You stumped us both on that one. We don't know that one. A question from Barbara. What about the newer medication, Evenity?
So let's talk about bones in general. What's the mechanism of action of virtually every drug? They're enzyme poisons. Okay, so while you can poison the enzyme and turn off the signals that the body's not working properly, and on the short term it may look okay, in the long term those mechanisms are there because the body needs them to function properly. So yes, Evenity has some advantages, for example, around the issue of blood clotting and things of that nature. But in general, it's the same problem. You're not dealing with the cause. The cause is inadequate nutrients and too much toxins and inadequate exercise, pure and simple. That's what it all is. If you don't deal with those three things, get the nutrients in, get the toxins out, get exercise to stimulate everything. If you're not doing that, short-term benefit, short-term results might be good, long-term failure. Not going to work.
Dr. Joe, you are the guiding light for thousands of practitioners on how to guide your patients through a detox concept, not a program that lasts a week, but detox for life. And can you give us some big picture views and then maybe dial it down a little bit for people about this concept of detoxing and how do they prepare for detoxing, things like that?
So thank you for that question. The answer is yes. In this toxic world, people have to be really, really smart about getting the toxins out of their body. But it starts with avoiding the toxins. And there's a lot we can do. I'll talk about that in a second. But also, I'm actually urge people to be cautious about detoxification programs until you prepare the organs of detoxification. As I recall, you interviewed me on my book, The Toxin Solution, quite some time ago.
Yes.
So the idea is these toxins are bad for us. So where the body can, it tries to stuff them away in recesses of the body where they're not very active, okay, because they cause too much damage. So if you start doing a detox program that releases these things from the deep tissues, where are they going to go? Now, if your gut is toxic, if your liver is overloaded and toxic, if your kidneys are failing, guess what? You're going to redistribute it throughout your body, like to your brain. Okay. So I say to people, before you go on a detox program, spend a couple of weeks, learn how to avoid toxins. No point going to a detox program. You keep filling your body with toxins. Then clean up your gut, clean up your liver, clean up your kidneys. Now we can go on a detox program. Now, if you don't want to, people don't want to get too extreme on that, there's some very simple things we can do to facilitate the body's own natural mechanisms for getting rid of toxins. Now, going back to the mercury. I understand why you put mercury as number one because it's really bad. So this is interesting. Our bodies secrete about 1% of the total body load of mercury into the gut every day. So mercury should not be that big a problem for us. But then we reabsorb 99% of the mercury dumped into the gut through intrahepatic recirculation. So we use intrahepatic recirculation so that the body can maintain molecules at once. So unfortunately, if we don't have enough fiber in the gut, the toxins that are supposed to bind to the fiber and get out through the stools get reabsorbed through intrahepatic recirculation. We developed our detox systems when we were consuming 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. Now we consume 15 to 20 grams of fiber a day, and not enough fiber to bind to the toxins. So avoid toxins, increase fiber.
Excuse me. When you say we developed our detox systems, you're referring to our ancestors, and those that survived were the ones that had these systems to detox properly.
Right.
And they developed these systems. It's always the ones that survive because they pass it on to the next generation.
Yes.
And they developed these systems for the amount of chemicals they're being exposed to, the amount of fiber that they were eating that grabs this stuff like a sponge and escorts it out in the poop.
Yes.
And now you're saying that we aren't eating 100 grams of fiber anymore. We're eating like 15 to 20, maybe 25.
Yes.
And so we don't have the sponges in our gut. So our detox system is, because our ancestors developed this for us, we're getting rid of about 1% of the mercury a day, but most of it's being reabsorbed back in again because we're not eating enough fiber.
Yep. Pure and simple.
That's a critical concept. Critical.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So yes, well said. I think we have a situation where we have some people who are incredibly toxic, and they say you can't give them vitamins because they react. And no matter what you do, they react. So those people, I do only two things. Well, three things. Number one is religiously avoid the toxins. Number two, start getting some fiber into them. Okay. And number three, if at all possible, have them take some N-acetylcysteine to increase their glutathione production, because glutathione is by far the most important molecule in the body for detoxifying and protecting us from toxins.
What is the amount of water, just pure water, that you recommend people get per day?
Well, if you can do 3 or 4 quarts a day, I think that's probably fine. I know some people like more, but that's the number I shoot for.
Okay.
What do you recommend?
1/3 to a 1/2 ounce per pound body weight.
Okay, seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, it sounds similar to what you're saying. You know, we're in the same ballpark there. So the technology that we have now has allowed us to do the kind of research that is your passion, and looking to see more about these toxins and the impact of toxins, and following pregnancies till the children are 7 years old. And we have this technology now that we didn't have 30 years ago. And yet now we're measuring these things, and we're measuring the results of the amount of these toxins that are coming into us, but we're still thinking like we thought 30 years ago as a people and how we take care of ourselves. What would the ideal young couple that want to have their first baby, how should they be structuring their thinking around living in this threatening world, this toxic threatening world? How should they be thinking as they're starting their life together? What would be
Great
the ideal?
question. Oh, that's a great question. One of the lectures I now give is on how environmental toxins is the primary cause of the infertility epidemic we're experiencing as well. Okay, so I said, by the way, I don't know if you know, I used to do natural childbirth. I used to do home deliveries. So this is an area really close to my heart. If possible, I say to women, please come to me a year before you decide to get pregnant. Okay, give me a chance to get these neurotoxins out of your body, so you're going to have a healthier baby. So what do I mean by that? Okay, well, first off, get my book, The Toxin Solution. Yeah. Avoid the toxins as much as possible. Now, when we think about toxins, there are two kinds. There are persistent toxins and non-persistent toxins. So I'm not talking about metal versus chemical. I'm just talking about how long do they stick around in the body. Well, it turns out arsenic is a non-persistent toxin. Stop exposure, goes away. Phthalates, bisphenol A, these are non-persistent toxins. Stop exposure, they go away. But then we also then have these what are called chlorinated hydrocarbons. They're things like DDT and PCBs, and also things like the PFASs, the perfluorinated compounds. They have very long half-lives. Like the PCBs, half-lives are measured in 2 years to 2 decades. Wow. So you go and eat farmed fish, and the PCBs in the farmed fish, you eat that farmed fish, and those PCBs, some of them are going to be with you the rest of your life. Okay, so there's a lot of these things people can do to religiously avoid all the non-persistent toxins and to start helping the body get rid of the persistent toxins. So things like not just fiber and NAC, but saunas. Saunas are great for getting these toxins out of the body, both persistent and non-persistent, both metals and chemicals. Are you familiar with the work of Stephen Genuis up in Edmonton, Alberta?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Great. Yes, great work.
Brilliant.
So he took people, put them in a sauna, scrape off their sweat, and measured the toxins in the sweat and compared the toxins in the blood and the urine. He found many toxins in the sweat that were not in the blood or the urine because the body was sequestering the stuff, trying to keep it out of circulation because it causes so much damage. Okay, so you got to get the stuff out of the body.
Yeah. Are there any biomarkers that people can use to determine what level of toxins they've got in their body?
The answer is yes. Now, this is good for 90% of the population. If you've got somebody who I call the yellow canary, the people who are really easily damaged by chemicals, it doesn't work for them because they probably lack this genetics. So it turns out our smart bodies increase the recycling of glutathione in proportion to the toxic load. Okay, and the reason the enzyme that does that is called GTTP. GTTP is the liver enzyme and was in the past measured in the blood as a way of determining if a person had hepatitis. Because if you have hepatitis, liver cells are inflamed, they start leaking enzymes into the blood, you measure in the blood. But it turns out GTT within the normal range, which is 10 to 60 units, goes up in proportion to toxic exposure. So one way to measure not only how toxic a person is, but if the detox program is working,
Can I ask a question?
their GTT should go down.
Do the beta-pleated sheets just have more?
Sorry, Lara's class. Okay,
Yes.
so a personal experience. So I started getting really interested in environmental medicine about 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, 12 years ago now. And so as I started looking at this research, I decided to measure my GTTP. So normal range is 10 to 60. Mine was 27. I thought, well, that's not too bad. Then I looked at research further and saw that, oh, with people with a GTT above 40 have a 20 times increased risk for diabetes. People with a GTT of 30 have an 8-fold increased risk of diabetes. Oh, and isn't that interesting? Now, this is supposedly normal. Normal is sick in our society.
Yes.
So I started getting really careful. So I started at 27. I did a test about 3 years ago. I was down to 23. Just did a test a couple of months ago, I was down to 17. Okay. So as I systematically stopped my toxic exposure, started doing more saunas, my GTT went down, which tells me I'm on the right track. Now, if it hadn't gone down, then I know, oops, there's some toxin here I haven't picked up. So I recommend everybody's listening, measure your GTT-P. And if it's above 20, okay, normal is 10 to 60, above 20, you have increased risk of disease from toxins.
Yeah, that those toxins are accumulating in your body. Well, Dr. Joe, we're at the hour. I want to respect that. And it's just such a pleasure to spend time with you. And I'm sorry to everyone that I didn't do the shout outs. I saw that Cheryl was asking if that's Australia or Austria, and it was Australia. That he was talking about. And for all the shout outs that I didn't do, I'll just say thank you so much for being here. And I hope you got as much out of this one tonight as I did. Dr. Joe, thank you very much. Please pass that on to Lara, that very much appreciate it. Everyone buy their book, buy Dr. Joe's book, The Toxic Solution. It's a fabulous big picture overview of how do you start this whole process of detoxing. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for great work.
Thank you.